Welcome to another beautiful Friday on Speaking for Him. I'm Dan VanZalen, and here is your host, Andrew Gommonson.
Hello, guys. Today, we're here in the studio, Dan and I, to give you another great Speaking for Him podcast, and we're going to the movies again, and this time,
Yay!
For the very first time since Dan became the executive producer, we are actually going to be able to discuss this together because we've both seen it, and it was a good movie. So I'm excited to dig into the movie Breakthrough, which actually I did not know until I don't remember if I found out right before I watched the movie or if it flashed on the credits or whatever. I did not know until just recently that it actually was based on a book that the mother wrote about her experience.
Oh, I didn't know that at all.
Yeah, it's based on a book called The Impossible. And now there's a movie tie-in edition that they changed the title to Breakthrough, but it was originally called The Impossible, and it was written by the mother, and so that's what the inspiration for the film is.
Interesting.
And so it was a true story, and
happened in 2015.
It happened just a few years ago too, and Dan and I were just talking off mic about how we didn't really hear about it when it happened.
No.
Even though I guess he did have a Facebook page that went viral while he was in the hospital, and I actually found his Facebook page. He's still using it to update people on his life. He just graduated from high school a couple of weeks ago, so
yep.
That's a nice little update. So Dan, why don't you kick us off with our quote of the day?
All right. It's not a good time to talk, Jason replied. That's why I'm here. Breakthrough.
All right. And Dan, as you and I have already discussed off mic, there's a couple times where that comes up.
Oh, yeah.
And it's so true though, because a lot of times when we don't really want to talk to somebody,
it's when we should.
It's really when we should, because bottling our emotions up and not discussing them in a productive way can be bad. And I like how the pastor was just there for her and didn't have any expectations of her in the process of being there for her, because that's really the way we need to be. So, you know.
Yep.
All right. Well, why don't you, since you've actually watched this movie, why don't you start us off with a synopsis?
Uh-oh. You want to do the movie trailer first?
Oh yeah, let's do the movie trailer, and then
we can try a synopsis.
And then he will give us a synopsis of the movie.
A thing which I'm really bad at, by the way.
Well, if you start to ramble, I will help you along, but I ramble too, so we're in this together.
All right.
But here's the movie trailer.
Rise and shine. Breakfast is ready in 10 minutes. And don't make me come back up there. This is our town. It's a close-knit community, the kind of place where everyone knows everyone.
Hi, Miss J.
Hey, how are you girls? And we're always there for each other.
Nice sermon, Pastor.
What do you guys have on for the rest of the day?
Well, John has a basketball game.
Yeah, I've seen this guy hoop it up around here. This kid is so lit.
Text your mom tomorrow and tell her when and where to pick you up. And, don't do anything stupid.
Love you guys.
Boys, get off the ice!
We're training for the Olympics, sir!
Cindy!
He's been underwater for more than 15 minutes. It's gonna be a recovery, not a rescue. I got something.
We got him!
We've done everything medically possible. There's nothing more we can do.
No. Please, God, send your Holy Spirit to save my son.
A 14-year-old St. Charles boy who spent 15 minutes trapped underwater is continuing to fight for his life.
I don't believe John will survive the night.
You don't know my son. He is a fighter. So I need you to be the best for John, and you just let God do the rest. You are my pride and joy. I can't wait to see you shoot those baskets and run up and down the court again.
The Smith family asked for one thing. Please pray for John.
in the water that day. I was ready to give up, but then I hear this voice telling me, go back. Either I'm nuts
or God's talking to you.
But I don't believe in God.
I believe it, but maybe that only goes so far with something like this.
I'm your pastor. I'm supposed to walk alongside you for as long as it takes.
Did you see the Facebook page? It's gone viral.
Tommy?
I hope he's gonna be okay.
We're not gonna get through this alone. Whatever you have for me, for Brian, for John, I surrender. I will call upon your name.
All right, Dan, why don't you give us a synopsis and some general thoughts?
Joy. Maybe I shouldn't watch movies anymore. Any case. So, we start out with our protagonist of the story, though he doesn't actually say much in the movie, Mr. John Smith. Starts off, with him being a bit of a brat to his parents, selfish on the basketball court, and then he falls through the ice, and everything goes downhill.
And it's kind of interesting. A couple of things are interesting. First of all, his name is John Smith, so that's not something we're making up. When I first heard that their name was Smith and that his name was John Smith, I was like, you guys adopted him. You could have given him a more
original name,
more flowery name than John. But it
actually works really well for him, though.
No, it does work really well for him. But my thought as this is going forth, and I realized his name was John Smith, I was like, that doesn't sound very real for a true story. But anyway,
it does sound a little awkward.
But that is his name.
It is in fact his name.
So anyway, but I just thought that this movie was very well layered.
Oh yeah, there's basically 3 storylines going on.
Well, because you first think, well, you know what's going to happen because it's a true story. You know that he's going to fall through the ice. You know that he's going to be basically declared dead. You know he's going to come back.
He was declared dead, essentially.
Yeah, he was declared dead. He was chemically dead for 45 minutes.
Yep. No heartbeat, no pulse, nada.
So it's really interesting. But you have the storyline of him and his struggle with his adoption, which is kind of a common refrain, especially if you're adopted, as a foreign adoption because you don't have your cultural,
no cultural identity.
And then you have...
I love the kid they got for that, though, too.
Oh,
he
did awesome. He was an awesome actor. And then you have the layer where the mom is struggling so much. She doesn't like the pastor.
That's a bit of an understatement.
She doesn't like his new methods for doing things. Now, again, I'm not sure how grounded in reality that particular aspect of the show was.
It might have been exaggerated a little bit, but I'm pretty sure it had a basis in fact.
But I think there was some basis in fact, because at the end of the movie, it talked about how she still was complaining to him about his hair, which
she still wants to fix his hair.
If you look at the real guy, he has much weirder hair than did Topher Grace in this film.
Yeah, this is true.
Which, by the way, I was shocked to see Topher Grace as a pastor in this film, and I wasn't sure how I would like it, but he did a really good job, I must say.
I like the way they set up the family dynamics for him too.
And then you had Josh Lucas as the father, and he's done several movies like We Are Marshall as the coach in that movie, and I think he did a basketball movie as a sports coach too, so he has some pretty well-known credits. Dennis Haysbert played the doctor, and he is well-known on 24 as the president of the United States and also as the Allstate guy. He's still doing Allstate ads. So it's kind of nice that he had that get. And then I'm not familiar with the name of the lady that plays Joyce, but the TV show This Is Us is a big cult hit right now on NBC.
I've never heard of it.
It's one of the few shows that's a drama that's not a legal drama or a medical drama. It's just a family drama. And it's on NBC. I've never watched it, but I know a lot of people who have, and they love it.
Yep.
So it's really neat to get someone with that kind of cred to do a movie like this. And I've heard her give testimony. She is, in fact, a believer. I don't know about Topher or about Dennis, but I know she is, or Josh, but I know she is, in fact, a believer. And so that was really neat to hear and find out. So,
we kind of skipped half the synopsis and went straight to general thoughts.
well,
that's fine.
I don't want to give away too much of the synopsis. But I was talking about the layers. So you have the layer where the kid is struggling to survive.
And you have his parents.
And you have the layer where his dad is struggling to know whether he'll survive, where his mom is insistent that he will.
And having her own crisis of faith on top of it.
And having her own crisis of faith, and how she's belittling the people that are trying to help her. And then she realizes, I've got to let him go. To me, that was a pivotal point.
I surrender.
In the movie was she goes to the top of the hospital and she says, I surrender. You can do with him what you want. And at that point, she had to realize that if he decided to take John,
John's
home,
gone.
then there was nothing she could do about it. But it was only at that point where she was able to finally relax and quit being the grizzly bear that she was acting like before then.
Great big mama bear.
Which is understandable from a human standpoint, but at the same time, she realized that her behavior was not right. And then the husband realized his behavior wasn't right because he needed to be right by her side and by John's, but he was too afraid. So I just like so many layers.
They tied that scene in because just before they try to wake up John is when they are reconciling.
Yeah.
And that was just great.
And then the whole relationship with the pastor,
Yep.
It's funny because she has a lot of the same concerns that I do, actually, because I grew up with the hymns.
Yep.
I don't like it when we bust out the modern choruses. I actually feel a little uncomfortable sometimes when I come to your church because most of the songs I don't know that well.
Yep.
And I'm not used to the praise band in the front of the church. But I also know that True Life Bible Church is full of people that love Jesus and love people. And so I love to be there, even though it's different culturally than what I'm used to.
Now, I'll be honest too. My dad, is an ex-pastor now, but he was in, Jason's shoes. His second church, he went in there and he realized, well, a good 90% of my congregation is either new families or relatively young families. And I got to do something to make sure that these kids, stay in. So he changed to praise and worship, and he changed the way things happened. And the 10% of those old hidebound people, ooh, they hated him for that. Took them 5 years, but they got rid of him.
Okay.
It was not fun.
Yeah. Okay. That can be hard. I know.
And the hard thing was for us is that the previous pastor was still around because he had just retired, and he was all for my dad's changes. He's like, we need to change the way we're doing it, otherwise we're going to lose everybody, and then we might hurt them that way.
I think that's the hardest part for pastors, as I understand it, is just the fact that a lot of times when a pastor steps down from being a pastor of a church, he feels like he has to leave in order to give the new pastor room to be the pastor.
Oh yeah. And part of that problem too is, a lot of the older, more traditional or hidebound, as it may be, members of the congregation will go to the old pastor if he's retired rather than to the new pastor, and that can cause its own problems. But enough with that depressing stuff.
All right.
Let's go for positive things for this movie.
Well, positive things from this movie is, first of all, I loved the way the school rallied around John.
Oh, yeah.
Because he had even though he was struggling to fit in, he had some real good friends.
And they went overboard.
And I don't know if his girlfriend now was the one that was portrayed in the movie, but he does have a long-term girlfriend.
I think it's the same person.
According to his Facebook page. So she may have been portrayed in the movie, which is kind of awesome.
Well, if you remember the pictures at the end, it was his friend and his girlfriend next to him, and then they did who it really is.
So I think it might have been, but that was kind of cool. And when they found out that he had woken up, because he had been in a medically induced coma, and then they
almost 3 days.
It's hurting him because we can't give him more medicine. So she said, wake him up, which is something she never would have said if she hadn't surrendered.
Probably
so
not.
That's another one of those things going back to the whole surrender conversation.
And then he wakes up and they send a text message to his friend in the middle of class.
And they all ran out.
And then everyone runs out and then the teachers go bananas about it.
I didn't understand the basketball practice in the middle of the day, but.
Well, I think that was his afternoon class.
Maybe it was phys ed.
It might have been too.
But that was a pretty cool scene right there when they all
that was a great scene.
Realized that he was awake and
everyone's celebrating, and it was a madhouse, and we adored it greatly.
Did you see anything negative?
Not a lot, really. I'll be honest. But the only negative thing I had before I got really into the movie was right at the beginning when they're doing, they're setting right when they're setting up for the very beginning of the movie where they have him drifting down as in the crucifix position. My first thought was, that's not the way it happens. I remember because I have been in a similar situation.
Well, the interesting thing about it was, and I never really confirmed necessarily that this is 100% accurate, but like, it looked like when things happened, he was pulling himself out and then he got kicked in the face accidentally by one of his friends.
And it knocked him out,
that's when he went down. The one thing I will say is that everything I've read says that the part about the guy being an atheist, the guy who rescued him being an atheist,
Tommy,
and drawing a little closer to God through the events, that was never really pointed out in real life. It's a good storyline and it's a good reminder.
I don't know if he was per se drawn closer to God, but it was kind of slapped in his face that God's not fake.
I'm just saying it's not really established that he was an atheist is what I'm saying.
Oh, yes, yeah.
So they kind of definitely built that up for the film, but it does make a good point that the only explanation for all of this is that God was intervening.
Yeah. And it's kind of ironic that the Christian guy was the guy who said, we're only going to find a body. We're only going to find a body. And the atheist guy is like, well.
Well, it's interesting too. In the film, at least, he hears a voice telling him, go back. And then he talks to his chief later and the chief said, I didn't say anything.
I didn't say anything.
Then
who was talking to me?
Again, I don't know how accurate that is to real life, but I do know that God intervenes. And I do believe in angels. So it's an important thing to think about. It is.
And really the only other negative thing, and that happens to be with my impatience, is I dislike that setting up period you have to do at the beginning of the movie. Because it always seems so slow.
And what did you think about Uptown Funk? I just had
Uptown Funk.
He was listening to Uptown Funk.
That's what he was listening to. I didn't realize what it was.
I was like, okay, that's interesting. I wonder if he actually does like that song.
That is kind of interesting. Well, the funny thing was, when they were playing it as the background music before they revealed that that's what he's listening to, I was like, why are they playing this?
I know, because at first it doesn't even match up in any way. You're just kind of like, what's going on?
Yeah, that was kind of out from left field there.
But really, it was very solidly acted, as you already alluded to, and there wasn't really a whole lot of cheese. And even the semi-funny line, it's not a good time to talk, but that's why I'm here. I mean, it's a funny line in a way.
Only out of context.
But it's also very good.
And the delivery was perfect.
Because that's the whole point. Do you have a favorite character other than John, or maybe his mother too? Because those are easy ones.
Well, I'm assuming I'm not allowed to say all of them, which I wouldn't anyways. But actually, I did rule out John and his parents for favorite character, or even Jason for that matter, because they're so integral, so you can't really like them or dislike them too much without wrecking the movie. But my favorite characters, let's be honest here. I like, Tommy, the atheist guy. He's, the black guy of the pair that fished out John. I also like, both the doctors, really. Because they both make very good points at one point in the movie. You know, the
absolutely.
I think it was Dr. Sutter.
Yeah.
Yes. And they have this little short note from him at the end of the movie. Patient came in dead. Mother prayed. Patient is alive.
Yeah, that's
which totally summarizes his thoughts on the matter.
That basically puts it in as clear
as you can be.
Yep.
But one of the great parts is because the medical professionals, like the guys who are actually taking care of him, are such great characters. I think mention has to be made over the nurse that keeps doing chest compressions on him. That
man.
guy did not stop for about 45 minutes.
And you could tell that he
went all out. He was crying when he left.
Yeah, he did not want to give up.
He would not give up. And how much perseverance does that have to be? You're a nurse in an ER. How many dead people do you see coming in? And how much perseverance do you have to keep going?
I would not have the emotional fortitude. I'm glad I can't physically do any of those jobs because I would not have the emotional fortitude for it. I can tell you that.
I know
right now.
And I love the fact probably one of my most favorite parts in that movie is, when, Dr. Grant's talking with Mr. and Mrs. Smith. And, Mrs. Smith says, I need you to be the best doctor and leave everything else to God. Well, no one said whether or not he's a Christian, but you see him, he just sits there, he leans back a little bit, he says, okay. And that was that.
That was a really good scene too, because
how hard is it for a professional like him at the top of his field to say, okay, I'll leave things to God?
Yeah, that is very, very telling as well, because he was ready to say,
I'm ready to pull the plug. I don't
have hope for your son, And
he literally said that.
She's just like, I'm here because you're the best.
Are you not the best? Have I been lied to?
Do your best.
Yeah, that is something.
Oh, and there was another layer to it, which I really appreciated at the end, where his teacher talks to him.
Oh, again, she asks why.
And she said, why do you think you survived and my husband didn't? And he's struggling with it, survivor's guilt,
Yeah.
But it was important to ask that question because that's what people always say when something miraculous happens. Like, if God really cares, why doesn't he heal everybody?
Oh, and then during his testimony, when he quotes her while she's in the audience.
Oh, yeah.
Because she said to him at the beginning of the movie, and at the beginning, he was all, pish-pawing it, because he's an arrogant little kid. But at the end, he says, there once was a great teacher who told me, the past is lost to us forever, and tomorrow is ours to win or lose.
Which is another great quote. There's a lot of great quotes in this.
It's a great quote, but it also acts as an answer to her. It's his answer to her, however many days later that was.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I've seen this on, numerous shows, but isn't it funny when people say, are you quoting me to me?
Yeah, that can be fun.
Cause that will happen if your dad is always imparting wisdom and then you impart the same wisdom back to him, then he could be like, yeah, I am quoting you to you.
Cause you need to hear it again.
But yeah, it was just an all around good movie. As a matter of fact, I don't really have any least favorite characters.
I do, but they're kind of supposed to be. Those brats at the end.
Well, there were some brats at the end.
Who says, are you going to walk on water? It's like, oh my word, I can't believe people are actually like that.
But just like him dealing with surviving and then
the notes on his locker, why did you survive when my mom didn't and such
and his friends feeling guilty because they were relatively uninjured and he was in the hospital fighting for his life.
Oh yeah.
So all these layers, like that's what I liked. Cause you go into it thinking it's going to be this predictable movie and there was a degree of predictableness to it. But there was enough layers that it wasn't predictable at the same time.
I didn't really predict anything about this movie other than the obvious fact that he lives. Cause that was made very obvious. I mean, they basically started off with he's alive. So
and
this is the
cast
story.
It very well. Like the young guy, what's his name? Marcel. What's his last name?
I don't remember. But the guy who plays John, right?
Marcel Ruiz.
Yeah.
And I hope he does a lot more movies like that because he's very good at what he does.
He's got a very open expression, so it's great.
So I would encourage anyone to get out and see this movie at the time of this recording, and I'm going to post it in just a few days from the recording of this podcast. It is still in theaters.
It has been since mid-April.
Still showing quite a few showings, so people must be going to see it. So I would encourage you to get out and support this movie because we want more movies like it made.
Yep. And, so what do you think is the biggest lesson to take away?
I think the biggest lesson to take away is, number one, you never know what tomorrow will bring. I was watching an interview, actually, because I looked it up on YouTube, an interview that John Smith did on a talk show with his mom after all this happened. I think they were promoting her book. But one thing he said is, I learned not to take life for granted. He said, every day, my dad pokes his head into my room now and says, I love you, son. And then I say, I love you, Dad. And every day after I brush my teeth, I walk down and give my mom a kiss and tell her I love her and say good night. These are things I think he didn't say it, but I think he was implying that these are things that he didn't do before the accident. But
they certainly implied it during the movie.
But now, well, they did, but I wasn't able to confirm how rebellious he was before the accident in real life. But the point being, I think he learned some lessons about how precious life is and not to take it for granted. And I think that's one of the biggest lessons. And then also just the other one that his mom learned is that there are some things we can't control no matter how controlling we are.
Yes. So, I did enjoy the fact that she learned that how bad of a control freak she was and was able to let that go. I'm sorry that it took this steep of an incident to do that for her, but I'm glad it happened.
The other interesting thing, and I understand they had to have they wanted to have a singular focus for the movie, but he is one of 4 brothers, not just an only child.
Yeah, that was a little bit awkward.
That is kind of an interesting thing. I wonder what his brothers felt like about. They were probably thinking, "Who am I going to get to play me?" And then they said, "Well, you're not going to be in there." No, I'm just kidding. Just kidding. That's a total conjecture statement. They never officially said that. But.
I'm sure that even if they knew that, they're probably a little bummed out because who doesn't want to be represented in a movie, right?
Oh, absolutely, absolutely.
No, I think for the biggest lesson, well, actually, I'll preface this. I enjoyed the way they had him wake up, the waking up scene, or they put him underwater and brought him back up. But I have to admit that, for me, and it's a little bit uncomfortable to say this, but I'm kind of used to it now, but for me, this brought back a lot of memories because, when I was, I must have been a little younger than him still. I think I was about 12. I fell out of a boat and hit another canoe behind me and woke up 13 feet underwater. Wow. And I remember being not quite aware, but being aware enough to realize that I was sinking underwater.
Wow.
And so I can say with perfect honesty that the whole crucifix pose where he's holding himself basically straight might be, movie magic. Let's play up the drama, but that is more or less how you fall when you're sinking in the water.
Well, I kind of relate to because when I was 9 years old, I drove my wheelchair into the pool at the YMCA.
Why'd you do that?
Well, because my brothers were taking swim lessons and they were in the pool and then they moved everybody over to the hot tub and the hot tub was on the far end of the, of the pool area. And so they had this part of the pool called the chocolate, which was a dark part of the paint. And they said, don't run on the chocolate. They were always telling the kids, don't run on the chocolate so you don't fall in. And I went on the chocolate and my wheel went over the edge and I plunged into the pool. But thankfully the lifeguard saw me. But I distinctly remember seeing the water go over my head and being like, what am I going to do?
Yeah.
And the only thing I could do is hold my breath and wait to be rescued.
To be honest, waking up underwater like that is really disorienting. Because, it's a very strange state of mind because I had a head injury, obviously, and I was probably fairly concussed. But I remember waking up and looking up and I seen this little white dot with green around it, and then everything else is black.
Mm-hmm.
Just black. And I remember absently wondering to myself, am I going to die? Is this what death is like? And then about half a second later, my survival instincts kicked in, and I don't remember seeing my my youth counselor coming down to try to get me, because he dove over almost immediately after they saw me go under and not come up right away. And he told me he was about halfway down, swimming as hard as he could, and I passed him going the other way. Very, very fast, apparently.
So you were swimming? You were actually swimming, but you didn't realize it, or?
No, I had woken up with my back just brushing the underwater plants. So I'm maybe a foot or two above. I'm probably about 2 feet above the silt. And when I woke up, I first thought, what I told you before, because I was so very out of it. And then my heart started beating very fast, and I became clear-headed enough to realize that, hey, I need to go up towards the light because that's where air is. And I snapped myself upright, and I'm still not certain how I managed that, because I went from supine, parallel to the lake, bottom, to straight upright. I mean, like literally straight up and down as if I was a popper with a weight.
The Bible talks about guardian angels, so perhaps your guardian angel was working overtime that day.
Maybe. But because I remember my legs snapped down and my feet went through the silt so fast that it felt like I just barely brushed it. And I went straight for the surface. I did not see anybody. And then I almost threw myself completely out of the water. I was going so fast.
Well, all this to say, we think that you should see Breakthrough. It's a really well done movie, really realistic movie. And the other thing is, he didn't come back with all these extreme tales of heaven either.
No.
He said, I remember going under. I remember people saying call 911, and then I woke up.
Yep.
Several days later.
Many days later.
So.
Which is, in and of itself, that's his disorienting experience.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Well, and that's kind of the depiction, like you said at the end, where in his mind he was coming up through the water, and then all of a sudden opened his eyes and
everything's blurry.
There was his mom. So.
And the doctor.
Anyway, we would really encourage you to go see this film and support the makers of it.
Oh, yes.
And I hope more films like this come out.
So how do we rate this film? 1 breakthrough to 5 breakthroughs.
I'm giving it a solid 5 out of 5. I don't do that very often, but I don't really know of a flaw in this movie.
I cannot say there's an actual flaw to the movie other than,
I know you were looking for one.
I was in fact looking for one.
Because you said before we recorded, you're like, where am I going to find the flaw?
Yeah, right? I think, the only actual flaws are basically the flaws you find on any cutting room. So it's like, there's no actual flaws with the performance per se. So yes, I also have to say this is a 5 out of 5.
I try not to do that because I want to give honest feedback and not just be like a fanboy of all these Christian films. But
this was a great film.
I really feel that way. I really feel it was just so well done.
This is actually the first film that I went and paid money for in, 7 years.
And you didn't,
I'm glad.
you didn't feel bad about it afterwards.
No.
That's good.
It was great. I loved it.
He didn't fall asleep like when he watched St. Patrick. So
let's be fair. I was at home trying to watch it on my Kindle.
Yes. So with that being said, we will say goodbye to you for another week, but, I hope that you have a great weekend. I hope you get some popcorn if this movie's on DVD by the time you hear this podcast.
I think it'll still be in theaters.
Well, it should be if you're listening on schedule, but if you found it in my archive somewhere and it's on DVD, then pop some popcorn this weekend and watch it with your family. It is something I'm buying. If you can get to theaters, then by all means get to theaters and support it.
Indeed.
So, that's all I have for you this week. I'll just say have a great weekend and keep serving the best of masters.
Thank you for listening to today's episode. Your host has been Andrew Gomison, founder of Speaking for Him. For more information on today's show and to leave us comments and voicemails, visit speakingforhim.blogspot.com. You can find Andrew's ministry at speakingforhim.com. That's speaking, 4, HIM. You can also interact with us at facebook.com/speakingforhim and on Twitter @SpeakingForHim. And when you look for us on iTunes and Stitcher, let us know what you think of the podcast by leaving a rating and review.